Today's Tuesday, January 19th, and it's a white day. A reminder to any junior or senior who is interested in being more active during D or E block and would like to be able to snowshoe and play games outdoors with Mr. Holden. Please be sure to see Mr. Murphy in guidance, and we will work to get you moving during the school day and have a blast with Mr. Holden. Students, don't forget, anyone who did not have their photo taken for the yearbook are asked to stop by Fuller Hall between 8:30 a.m. and 3 p.m. tomorrow or Thursday. Mr. Legge will be set up on the stage to take studio portraits. Please contact Mr. Legge at slegge@stjacademy.org with any questions. The fashion program is seeking models of all body types and gender expressions for this year's fashion show. Please stop by Morse 201 on your cohort day after school. Sign-ups will be today, Tuesday, 119 for the white cohort, and tomorrow, Wednesday, 120 for the green cohort. If you were signed up as a model last year, we'd love to have you back. Keep an eye on your email. If you have any questions, please email Ms. Charo at emma.charo@stjlabs.com. Scope will hold its first meeting of the semester today, right after conference period, at 310 in Ranger 212. If you're on campus, we'd love to see you in person. Members who are online can Zoom using the link Ms. Morris sent you. If you're interested in learning about or joining Scope, we always welcome new students and ideas. Please join us or email Ms. Morris at cmorris@stjacademy.org. Thursday Skins with the Outing Club will start this Thursday at 3:15 on Brantview Drive. Skinning, or alpine touring, is the act of climbing up a mountain and skiing down it. Mr. Bentley will be taking a small bus to Burke each Thursday this winter to skin the mountain. In order to participate, you'll need to have your own equipment, including a helmet and backpack, an adequate headlamp, and a signed permission form if you are a day student. Come and see Mr. Bentley in Ranger 209 for signups, questions, and permission forms, or email at james.bentley@stjlabs.com. Space is limited to 6 students, and some loaner gear may be available. Our first skin will meet at Brantview Drive this Thursday at 3:15 p.m. The finest nonfiction books of 2020 and the decade are on display in the library now. Pulitzer Prize winners NPR, New York Times, Kirkus, Goodreads, Slate, and LitHub Best of the Year books, Stonewall Book Award winners, Carnegie medalists, and so many others. You'll find the best writing on science, nature, coming of age, and history, and timeless topics such as poverty, racism, and politics. These books have stories of triumph and love, redemption and growth to help you navigate our unprecedented times. Email library@stjlabs.com to make a browsing appointment and for a complete list of books on offer. And happy birthday today to Ethan Spence and Brody Gordon. Happy birthdays. And a special happy belated birthday to Mr. Eaton, who celebrated his birthday yesterday. Happy birthday. Have an excellent day.
Thank you, Sierra. Good morning, everybody. I feel fortunate to work in a place that has the ability to turn on the light. Such a simple phrase, really. But the phrase itself has so many different meanings, whether literally turning on the light as you come into a room, or like many of you experience in electricity class when Mr. Roberts might say that a light switch is used to be able to change a closed circuit to an open circuit. The main function of the switch is to break or control the path of electricity. As a teacher, as an advisor, or as a coach, we might also look at that path for electricity from each of our students, no matter what area we're looking to inspire. The breakthrough is when one of our students has one of those aha moments, as we like to call it, and we know that we have turned on the light when we hear that spark in both their hearts and their minds. Today, as many of you hear from us from the stage, I want you to think about this question. How might I turn on the light? How might I lead the way for others to find the light? How might I be the agent of change so that we're drawn to the warmth and the allure and the gift of what we call light? especially in this time in our lives, in this moment in history, as the days become longer, more filled with light, and we begin to seek to understand more and look a little bit more closely for that inner light that guides us. As you know, there are moments in all of our lives that help define ourselves. These moments can often be seen, but only in retrospect. Rarely do we find ourselves in the midst of choosing something while knowing how it shapes us for the future. In following yesterday's message in the chapel talk about hope, about kindness, about finding the light, I offer these words this morning from Dr. King to lead us to what we might hear about from some of our student leaders and program leaders. Dr. King said that every man must decide whether he will walk into the light of creative altruism or the darkness of destructive selfishness. This is the judgment. He then goes on to challenge us with what he calls life's most persistent and urgent question. What are you doing for others? It's a great question for us to think about this morning in a time of a pandemic and political and social unrest, how we might look to ask that question of ourselves. What is it that we are doing for others? It's with that question in mind that we will first hear from Sierra Manassas Kernan, followed by our Community Recreation Director, Joe Fox. Both have messages of agency, light, and hope, both looking to help us seek to understand, both urging us to turn on that inner light and think about what we might be doing to serve others. We'll talk more about some other projects that are to come for us in the St. Johnsbury community. But please, as we get started this morning, please help me welcome Sierra Manassas Kernan.
Good morning. My name is Sierra Manassas Kernan, and I am a member of the senior class here at the Academy. Over the summer and this past semester, I have become more involved in the fight against racial injustice, along with many of you. And I am very excited to be talking to you today about Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I didn't know him, but my great-grandmother did host the doctor and his wife, Coretta Scott King, for dinner on more than one occasion. My great-grandmother was big on civil rights in Hyannis, Cape Cod. She boycotted beaches, became involved with the NAACP. She was an incredible woman who I only met when I was a baby. She was the closest experience that I had with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. until my 8th grade field trip to Washington, D.C., when we visited his memorial along with the Washington Monument, the Abraham Lincoln Memorial, all the other touristy things that you do when you're in the city. There was something about being in the presence of the statue for the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial that made me feel like I was going to cry, which might not seem like a lot because my friends know that I cry at almost every movie that I've ever seen. But this was for a different reason, one that I don't think many of us can quite grasp, but I'm going to try to help you understand. I want you to imagine me. I look exactly the same way that I do right now because I haven't grown since the 7th grade. I have a water bottle in my hand and my shirt says, "A book a day keeps reality away," with glasses far too big for my face because no one had the heart to tell me that I looked awful. And I want you to imagine this short, tired 8th grader standing in front of the statue of one of the greatest civil rights leaders in the history of America. There are a lot of good memories for me in DC, but the most prominent memory that I have was arriving at the memorial. There was this feeling of power. It was a space that you didn't need words to fill because it's already filled. Everything that I had learned about the civil rights, about slavery, about the inequalities that took place in this world had been memorialized in this representation, and I was afraid to stand too close to it. There are so many things that I wanted to say to the statue, to the Reverend Doctor, if he was still with us today. I'd like to thank him, because without him, I would be a black instead of a black woman. I'd be simplified down to my color, because that's all that I would have been, and sometimes still am seen as. A color that doesn't recognize my heritage, my citizenship, or even my humanity. I would tell him that without him, my family would be in Alabama and in North Carolina, or scattered about without the funds to move further up north. I wouldn't be taking classes at an integrated school, let alone an international boarding school. I wouldn't be the first person in my family to go to college, and I certainly wouldn't be pursuing a career on the stage. I'd thank him, along with his wife, Coretta Scott King, John Lewis, Aretha Franklin, Nina Simone, Rosa Parks, Maya Angelou, James Baldwin, and Langston Hughes for giving the world the representation they needed to know that Black people can do anything that a white person can. And in doing so, they create an entire culture out of nothing but scraps and turn it into the Harlem Renaissance and modern music as we know it, creating something that Black people can identify with. But I'd also apologize to him. I'd apologize for not stepping up sooner and tell him that his words are still getting twisted today, used against protesters fighting for exactly what he fought for when he said, and I quote, "A riot is the voice of the unheard," end quote. I would apologize for the people who continue to cherry pick his words to silence the oppressed. I'd apologize because there are some who forget how recent the civil rights movement was. It was so close. My great-grandmother lived through that, and my other great-grandmother was still working on a plantation in the South when Dr. King was still alive. I feel like society and America as a whole has this mindset that the matter of civil rights was taken care of years ago, as if racism and injustice are things that we don't have to worry about anymore, when the truth is, many of us still have to worry about our civil rights, our human rights. The only difference from then and now is that now it comes in a different form. Threats to our civil rights don't come in the form of fire hoses or no colored folks signs. They creep out more subtly as microaggressions and misrepresentation and failed systems. You can see it in the shadow of the Washington Monument, on the war on drugs. You can see it in the protests that took place over the summer, in the curriculums that teach only of the struggles of Black people and not the triumphs that we accomplished after the Civil Rights Act of 1964. The words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. lifted nations, and I can only hope that one day my words can do the same. We did not know the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., but we will never forget his accomplishments that allowed us to be the country that we are today. And we will not forget his words as we continue to move forward, because we still have a long way to go. Thank you.
Good morning. My name's Joe Fox. I'm the Director of Recreational Programs here at St. Johnsbury Academy. I take the word recreation quite literally to mean to recreate, and I feel that this society needs additional recreating, and I think you're going to be key to that. Thank you for inviting me here to introduce a community-wide challenge that I hope you'll all consider taking part in. But before I talk about that, I want to talk about that famous march from Selma to Montgomery, led by the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and the events before and after. This 54-mile trek took place over 5 days from March 21st to March 25th in 1965. If you do a Google Images search of Dr. King right now, you will most likely come across photos of folks of all ages, races, and religions walking arm in arm across the Edmund Pettus Bridge to rally for what would become the Voting Rights Act of 1965 that was signed into law later that August. The historical significance of that march and the events surrounding it deserve deeper exploration, though, and the bravery of those marching cannot be overstated. Prior to the march, starting that January, Dr. King and others worked tirelessly to mobilize and register Black voters in Selma and nearby Marion, Alabama. At the time, only 2% of registered voters there were Black. By February, in response to their voter mobilization ramp-up, police brutality also started ramping up. On February 18th, Jimmy Lee Jackson, age 26, was shot trying to protect his mother from getting beaten by a cop's nightstick following an evening march in Marion, Alabama. On Sunday, March 7th, a protest and a march was organized from Selma to the state capitol in Montgomery to protest this travesty. Those marchers were met with horrific force on the Edmund Pettus Bridge right at the start of their journey in what became known as Bloody Sunday, with sadly, many white onlookers cheering on the violence. One of the leaders of that march who was severely beaten was fellow civil rights leader John Lewis, AKA Senator John Lewis, who recently passed away, and who, like Dr. King, devoted his life to the civil rights movement. In 1965, live satellite broadcasting was not a thing. Film was actual film that had to be flown to New York for splicing and broadcasting. Well, ABC News made a huge decision that day. They decided to interrupt a movie called The Judgment at Nuremberg, which had 48 million viewers lined up, just a few minutes into the start of that program. They did this to air the travesty that just occurred on American soil. The coincidences of a film that involved, at least in part, the complacency of witnesses that led to 6 million Jews being murdered in the Holocaust with what just happened in Alabama was shocking and undeniable to viewers. This, in large part, is what led to President Johnson agreeing to allow the now famous, successful 54-mile Selma to Montgomery March to happen later that month. On the final day of that historic march, on the steps of the Capitol in Montgomery, Dr. King said this: "The end we seek is a society at peace with itself, a society that can live with its conscience, and that will be the day not of the white man, not of the black man, that will be the day of man as man." And so, I'm honored to invite you to a month-long virtual Selma to Montgomery March. I encourage you to walk, to run, to ski, to bike, heck, meditate, okay? A little less than a mile a day, a mile and a half a day. The goal isn't really to walk 54 miles before February break. It's to take time and reflect on the legacy of Dr. Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. and that arc of justice that we talked about yesterday. A mile and a half should take the average person less than half an hour. And in that half an hour, I want you to ask yourself, am I, through my words and actions, helping bend that arc of justice in the right direction? If you'd like to join this month-long challenge, look for posters. They look like this around campus. Just take your little phone, hit the QR code, sign up. And honestly, I don't care if you sign up. Just think about what we've talked about here. And please, most importantly, when you're able, register to vote. Stay informed about current events and candidates' stances on the issues, and vote in a way that supports liberty and justice for all. When the Voting Rights Act of 1965 was finally signed into law that August, with the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. by his side, President Johnson included in his speech the, quote, outrage of Selma, and he called the right to vote, quote, the most powerful instrument ever devised by man for breaking down injustice and destroying the terrible walls which imprison men because they are different from other men. Thank you.
Sierra, Mr. Fox, thank you for your time. And Sierra, to you especially, many people say that stories save lives. And I think what you did today in working with our student body and having the courage to come up here is going to say a lot about how we're going to move ourselves forward. And to you, Mr. Fox, appreciate you making this a whole community-wide effort and helping us understand the importance of all of us joining in this as a fight together. That said, we know we're a little bit over time. I do have a couple of reminders, only because people have asked me to put this in. First, number one, out there to Ms. Huntington's advisory, it is her birthday today, so make sure you say happy birthday, and she's gonna be not very happy for me about saying that. And just quick reminders too, right, about doors. It's cold, it's gonna be really cold this week, so I want you to be thinking about that. The doors themselves open at 7:45. There are places, if you arrive here early, go to the dining hall. Mr. Robillard will meet you at the dining hall. There's lots lots of space in there for you to sit and be warm while you're waiting for the doors to open. Also in the South Church, Miss Angel is over there at the South Church meeting you every morning. There's space in there to stay warm. So please make sure that you do that. And don't forget your health checks, right? We've been really good about keeping our community safe in terms of health and safety. So some people are kind of coming to the front door without having their checks done or without having their stickers. So just going to remind each other to take care of one another as we move into this week of a little bit more colder weather. Thank you for warming our hearts. Thank you for turning on the light. We hope that you all have a great day.